Amara walked into the school clothes store with excitement bubbling inside her. It was a small shop, but it had all the latest styles and trends for the upcoming school year. As a teenager, Amara loved finding the perfect outfits, ones that would make her feel confident and ready for the school year ahead. Today, she had a mission: find a new pair of jeans, some trendy shirts, and maybe even a cute jacket for the fall. She walked past the neatly folded piles of clothes, feeling the soft fabric as she went, her fingers brushing over the shirts and pants. The store was quiet, with only a few customers inside, all of them busy trying on clothes or picking out accessories. But then she noticed a man watching her. He was tall, with a stern expression on his face. His eyes followed her as she moved around the store, and it made Amara feel uneasy. She brushed it off at first, assuming he was just another customer. But as she reached for a pair of jeans on a shelf, the man suddenly appeared beside her. "Excuse me, young lady," the man said in a sharp tone. "Can I help you with something?" Amara looked up at him, surprised. "Oh no, I'm just looking around, thanks." The man didn't smile. Instead, he crossed his arms and stared at her with suspicion. "You need to leave," he said abruptly. Amara's eyes widened in confusion. "What? Why?" she asked, feeling her heart race in her chest. "You're not supposed to be in here," he snapped. "This store is for paying customers only. You've been here long enough, and I don't like the way you're behaving." Amara felt a lump form in her throat. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had done nothing wrong. She was just browsing like anyone else. The man's words made her feel small, and she felt a sudden heat in her cheeks. Was he talking to her because of the way she looked? She wasn't sure, but something about his attitude didn't sit right with her. "I'm just looking for some school clothes," Amara replied, trying to keep her voice calm. "No, I said leave," he repeated firmly. "You've been here too long, and you're not buying anything. I'm not going to ask again." Amara stood there for a moment, shocked by the man's harshness. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. She was a paying customer like everyone else. Why was he treating her this way? What had she done to deserve being kicked out of the store? Her stomach twisted in knots as she grabbed her bag, feeling the eyes of the few customers on her as she turned to leave. She could feel the embarrassment burning in her chest, and she walked out of the store, her head down. The door's bell rang as she stepped outside, and for a moment, the cool air outside felt like a relief. But it didn't erase the sting of what had just happened. She had been treated unfairly, and she didn't know why. Amara stood on the sidewalk, taking a deep breath, trying to steady herself. The thought of going back into the store to confront the man filled her with anger, but she knew it would be better to tell her mom first. She pulled out her phone and dialed her mother's number, hoping she could make sense of everything that had just happened. Amara dialed her mother's number, the phone ringing in her ear as she stood outside the store. She was still shaken from the experience, her thoughts swirling with confusion and anger. Her mom, Tina, answered after a few rings, her voice warm and comforting as always. "Hey, sweetie, how's shopping going?" Tina asked. Amara paused for a moment before responding, trying to steady her voice. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something." "What happened?" "You sound upset," Tina replied, immediately sensing the change in her daughter's tone. "I was just in the store. One of the workers, this guy, he kicked me out. He said I wasn't supposed to be there, and that I wasn't a paying customer, even though I was just looking around." Amara explained, her words coming out quickly, like she was still processing everything that had happened. Tina was silent for a moment, clearly shocked by what her daughter was saying. "What? That doesn't make any sense. Did he give you a reason for asking you to leave?" "No, just that I had been there too long and wasn't buying anything. He said I was loitering, Mom. But I wasn't. I was just shopping like everyone else." Amara's voice cracked with frustration. "I don't know. It just feels wrong. Like he treated me differently for some reason." Tina's voice softened, filled with understanding. "I'm so sorry, Amara. That sounds like a terrible experience. We need to go down there right now and get to the bottom of this. No one should treat you like that, especially not when you're doing nothing wrong. Amara felt a small sense of relief at her mother's words. Her mom always knew how to make her feel better. Okay, Mom. I'm outside the store right now. Let's go. A few minutes later, Tina arrived, her car pulling up to the curb where Amara was standing. As she got into the car, Amara explained everything again, this time more calmly. Tina listened intently, her face serious as she tried to make sense of what had happened. She could tell that her daughter had been hurt by the way she was treated, and she wasn't going to let it slide. When they arrived at the store, Tina parked the car and turned to Amara. Stay here for a minute. Let me go talk to the manager. I'll get to the bottom of this. Amara nodded, her hands nervously clutching her bag. She watched as Tina walked into the store, her head held high with determination. It didn't take long before Tina was speaking to the manager, and Amara could hear their voices raised in discussion. Though she couldn't make out the words, she could tell that her mom wasn't backing down. Just as Amara started to feel a little more hopeful that something would be done about the situation, Tina emerged from the store, her expression mixed with shock and confusion. She didn't speak immediately, but when she did, it was clear that something big was going on. Amara, you won't believe this, Tina said, her voice filled with a mix of surprise and disbelief. The new owner of the store called me while I was inside. She said she knows us and has been trying to reach me for a while now. Amara's eyes widened in surprise. The owner knows us. Yes, Tina replied. She's someone I used to know a long time ago. And she's the one who bought the store recently. She's also, well, she's your friend's mom. Amara stared at her mom, still trying to process what she was hearing. She had no idea who this woman was, but if she was connected to their family in some way, maybe this could turn things around. Amara's mind was racing as Tina explained that the new store owner, Mrs. Caldwell, was someone she used to know. She couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. A connection. How was it that the owner of the store Amara had just been kicked out of was somehow related to their family? Wait, so you know her? Amara asked, still confused. Tina nodded, her eyes still wide with disbelief. Yes, we were friends a long time ago. I haven't seen her in years, but she just called me while I was inside talking to the manager. She heard what happened, and she's really upset about it. She wants to make things right. Amara felt a wave of relief wash over her. If Mrs. Caldwell was already on their side, then maybe things would finally start to make sense. But there was still a lot to figure out. So what now, Mom? Tina took a deep breath and looked at her daughter. Well, Mrs. Caldwell has asked to meet us. She wants to apologize for what happened and explains what she's going to do about it. We're going to go talk to her right now. Amara wasn't sure what to expect, but she followed her mom as they walked toward the car. It felt strange to be on the way to meet the owner of the store, someone who could have been the key to making everything better. She hadn't even known the woman's name until now, yet somehow this person had the power to change everything. They drove to a small office building not far from the store, where Mrs. Caldwell had set up shop. When they arrived, the receptionist smiled and ushered them inside. The office was clean and modern, with a few plants scattered around the room, and a desk with neatly arranged papers. Behind the desk sat a woman in her late 40s, with short brown hair and glasses. She looked up as they entered, her face softening when she saw Tina. Tina, it's been too long, Mrs. Caldwell said warmly, standing up from behind her desk and reaching out to hug her old friend. Tina returned the hug, clearly glad to see her. It really has, Cindy. I didn't expect to hear from you today, let alone in this way. Amara stood back, watching the two women reconnect. It was clear they had shared some good memories in the past. Mrs. Caldwell smiled at Amara, then motioned for them to sit down. I'm so sorry for what happened in the store, Mrs. Caldwell began. I've only just taken over, and I'm still learning the ropes. But hearing what that manager did to you, well, it's completely unacceptable. Amara looked at her, unsure of what to say. She had been so upset earlier, but now that Mrs. Caldwell was talking, it felt like she genuinely cared. She could see the sincerity in the woman's eyes. It was just. It was wrong, Amara said quietly. I didn't do anything to deserve being treated like that. I completely agree, Mrs. Caldwell replied, her voice firm. No one should ever feel like that in my store, especially not someone who's just trying to shop. That's why I'm going to make sure something like this never happens again. Amara felt a small sense of hope. This wasn't just an apology. Mrs. Caldwell was serious about making changes. I've already spoken with the manager, she continued. And while I don't want to rush to conclusions, I'm going to make sure he understands the importance of respect and inclusivity. We're going to make sure all of our staff is properly trained to treat everyone with dignity. Amara nodded slowly, still processing everything. It was hard to believe that this woman, who was so warm and genuine, had somehow become the owner of the store where she had been treated unfairly. I appreciate it, Amara said, her voice growing steadier. I just want to be able to shop without feeling like I don't belong. You belong everywhere, Amara, Mrs. Caldwell said with a reassuring smile. And that's the kind of atmosphere I want to create in this store. No one should ever feel left out or unwelcome. Tina smiled at her daughter, her face filled with relief. It sounds like you're in good hands, Amara. Amara looked at the two women, realizing that something good might actually come from all of this. Maybe, just maybe, the store could become a place where everyone felt welcome, no matter who they were. The following day, Mrs. Caldwell called Tina and Amara to come to the store for a meeting. She had arranged for both of them to speak directly with the manager, Mr. Thompson. Amara was nervous. Even though Mrs. Caldwell seemed sincere about fixing things, she still wasn't sure how the meeting would go. Would Mr. Thompson apologize, or would he try to defend his actions? When they arrived at the store, they were greeted by a different atmosphere. The once sterile and intimidating environment felt warmer, with staff members smiling and chatting with customers. Mrs. Caldwell was there waiting for them, a calm but serious look on her face. Thanks for coming, Mrs. Caldwell said, her voice firm yet inviting. I want to make sure everything is handled the right way, and I need your help with that, Amara. This meeting is about setting things right. Amara gave a small nod, unsure of what to expect but determined to speak up. Tina, standing beside her, gave her a reassuring smile. The manager, Mr. Thompson, walked over to them, his expression tight. He avoided eye contact with Amara, but she could feel the tension between them. This wasn't going to be an easy conversation. Amara, Mrs. Caldwell began, her voice steady but strong. I understand you were treated poorly in my store yesterday. I want you to know that what happened is unacceptable. I called this meeting so that we can talk about it openly and honestly. Mr. Thompson looked uncomfortable, shifting on his feet as he glanced at Amara. Look, I'm sorry for what happened, he said in a low voice. I didn't mean for things to go that way. I was just trying to make sure the store was being run properly. Amara looked at him, the frustration she felt yesterday starting to bubble up again. But you kicked me out for no reason, she replied, trying to stay calm. I wasn't causing trouble. I was just looking at the clothes, like anyone else. I know, Mr. Thompson said, nodding slowly. I didn't mean to single you out. I was just doing my job. But I see now that I could have handled it better. Mrs. Caldwell stepped in, her voice sharp but controlled. You didn't just mishandle a situation, Mr. Thompson. You made someone feel unwanted in my store. And that's not something we can overlook. Mr. Thompson's face flushed as he glanced down. I understand. I've made a mistake. And I'm truly sorry, Amara. There was a long pause before Amara spoke again. I know you're sorry, but I still don't understand why you thought it was okay to treat me like that. Mrs. Caldwell turned to Amara with an understanding nod. I completely understand your frustration, and that's why I've decided that things need to change. From now on, Every staff member will undergo training on how to treat all customers equally and with respect. Mr. Thompson nodded, but Amara could see the embarrassment on his face. He was clearly uncomfortable with the situation, but Amara couldn't help but feel a sense of justice. The apology, even though it was hard to hear, felt genuine. "I'll make sure it never happens again," Mr. Thompson promised, looking directly at Amara. "I want to make it right." Amara studied his face, trying to judge whether or not she could trust him. She felt a little better after hearing the apology, but she still wasn't sure how things would go moving forward. "You don't have to prove anything to me," Amara said, her voice more confident than before. "I just want to be treated like any other customer." Mrs. Caldwell smiled warmly at her. "That's exactly how it should be, Amara. I'm glad you spoke up, and I will make sure this doesn't happen again." With that, the tension in the room seemed to ease. Amara could sense that things were finally moving in the right direction. The store, once a place where she had felt humiliated, was now becoming a place of change, where customers, no matter who they were, would be treated with the respect they deserved. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time since the incident, Amara felt hopeful. The days following the meeting with Mr. Thompson and Mrs. Caldwell felt like a turning point for Amara. Though the situation had left a sour mark on her, things were slowly starting to improve. The store began to feel different, and as word spread through the community about what had happened, and about the changes that were coming, people started to show their support. Amara had noticed that when she walked past the store in the days after the meeting, it was bustling with people. Not just regular customers, but more families, people who looked like they felt comfortable in the space. There was an energy she hadn't felt before. The staff seemed to smile more, and even Mr. Thompson, who had been so cold during their last conversation, was acting much more polite and approachable when customers walked in. One afternoon, as Amara and her mother drove past the store on their way to run errands, Tina suggested they stop in and see how things were going. "We should check in on the store, Amara," Tina said, smiling. "I think you'll be pleased with what's happening." When they entered, Amara immediately noticed the difference. The store was brighter, with new signs about inclusivity and respect for all customers displayed prominently. There was a friendly atmosphere now, and the staff greeted everyone who entered with smiles and warm hellos. The shelves were organized neatly, but it wasn't just the store that had changed. It was the people who worked there. Mrs. Caldwell came over to greet them, looking relaxed and confident. "Amara, Tina, welcome. I'm so glad you could make it," she said, her eyes sparkling with energy. She looked happier than Amara had seen her during their first meeting. "Everything looks so different here," Tina said, glancing around. "It's amazing to see the change." Mrs. Caldwell smiled. "It's been a busy few days, but we've been working hard to create a welcoming environment. The new training for the staff is already in place. We're focusing on respect, kindness, and making sure everyone feels valued, no matter who they are or where they come from." Amara felt a weight lift off her shoulders as she looked around. She could tell that things were truly changing. The store had always been a place she liked to visit, but now it felt more like a community. There was something about the new policies that made her feel safer, like she could finally shop without being worried about what people thought of her or how she'd be treated. "It's really incredible," Amara said, looking at her mother, then turning back to Mrs. Caldwell. "I think this is what the store always needed. People want to feel respected." Mrs. Caldwell nodded in agreement. "Exactly. And it's not just about selling clothes. It's about building a space where everyone feels comfortable. We're seeing so many new faces in here, people from all walks of life, and it's been so rewarding. The community has really rallied around us." As Amara wandered through the store, she overheard several conversations between customers and staff. It was clear that people were appreciating the new atmosphere. One woman was talking to a sales associate about how much she enjoyed shopping at the store now because it felt inclusive and welcoming. Another man asked about some of the new products, and the staff answered with genuine enthusiasm. For Amara, this was a powerful moment. She had always loved shopping, but now she felt something more. The store was becoming a place of connection, of kindness, and most importantly, of respect. It was no longer a place that made her feel uneasy or unimportant. Her mom caught up with her as she was looking through some jackets. "How are you feeling about all this?" Tina asked, her voice soft. Amara turned to her, her face lighting up. "I feel good. I feel like things are finally the way they should be." "I'm proud of you, Amara," Tina said, her smile warm and full of pride. "You stood up for yourself, and because of that, everything is changing. Not just for you, but for everyone who shops here." Amara nodded, feeling a sense of accomplishment that she hadn't felt before. What had started as a painful experience was now turning into something positive. The store had become a place of growth, not only for the business but for the community, and Amara knew that it was just the beginning. There were still more changes to come, but this was a good start, a start she had been a part of. The weeks that followed were nothing short of transformative for both the store and Amara. As the community continued to respond positively to the changes, Amara felt more and more at ease every time she walked through the store's doors. The tension that had once filled the air had been replaced with a light, welcoming atmosphere. Amara was beginning to realize that what had happened to her wasn't just a mistake. It was the start of something much bigger. One afternoon, Amara received a text from Mrs. Caldwell inviting her to meet her at the store. She'd mentioned wanting to discuss something important. Amara was curious but didn't know what to expect. When she arrived, Mrs. Caldwell was standing by the front counter, greeting customers and chatting with the staff. "Amara, over here." Mrs. Caldwell waved with a bright smile as Amara walked in. As Amara approached, she noticed a few other people were standing around. Some of them looked familiar. They were staff members who had been working at the store before the changes, but now they all looked more comfortable, more at ease. Mrs. Caldwell motioned for Amara to join them. "Amara, I want to thank you again for everything you did. You spoke up when it mattered, and that made a huge difference. Because of that, we're doing something special." Amara was surprised, not sure where this was leading. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Caldwell gestured to the group of staff members and a few local community leaders who had also been involved in supporting the store. "We've decided to host a community event to celebrate our new direction. It's not just about the store. It's about showing that change is possible when we work together. And I'd like you to be a part of it." Amara's eyes widened. She had never expected to be part of something like this. "What would I have to do?" "We want you to help lead a conversation about what it means to feel respected and included," Mrs. Caldwell explained. "You've been through something that many people have, and your voice matters. This is about hearing from people like you, who have experienced how it feels to be treated unfairly and turning that into something positive." Amara took a moment to process what Mrs. Caldwell was saying. She had never thought of herself as someone who could speak to a crowd or lead a conversation. But there was something about the way Mrs. Caldwell believed in her that made her feel like she could do it. "I'm not sure I'm the right person for something like that," Amara said hesitantly. Mrs. Caldwell smiled gently. "You are exactly the right person. You've already helped more than you know. And this is your chance to help others who might be feeling the way you did. Left out, not seen, or unheard." Amara looked around at the group. They were all nodding in agreement, and the support was undeniable. A wave of warmth spread through her chest, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a deep sense of purpose. "Okay," Amara said, her voice steady. "I'll do it." The event was planned for the following weekend, and Amara spent the days leading up to it in a whirlwind of preparation. She worked closely with Mrs. Caldwell and the staff to organize the activities. They planned an open discussion where everyone could share their experiences and thoughts on inclusivity. There would be refreshments, music, and games for the kids, and the whole store would be transformed into a space for everyone to connect. When the day of the event arrived, Amara felt nervous but excited. As people began to gather in the store, she saw familiar faces from the community, some she had never spoken to before. There was a buzz of excitement in the air as the store filled up with customers old and new. The atmosphere was warm, vibrant, and full of energy. It was nothing like the cold, impersonal space she had once known. When it was time for Amara to speak, she stood in front of the crowd, her heart pounding in her chest. She glanced around and saw her mom in the crowd, smiling at her. Mrs. Caldwell stood at her side, offering a supportive nod. Amara took a deep breath, remembering what Mrs. Caldwell had told her, that her voice mattered. She began to speak, telling her story about how she had been treated unfairly at the store and how that experience had sparked change not just in the store, but in herself. She shared how important it was for everyone to feel respected, no matter who they were or where they came from. The room was silent as Amara spoke, the crowd listening intently. It was an emotional moment, one that Amara never thought she would experience. But as she continued, she realized that her words were reaching people. They were hearing her. They were understanding. When she finished, there was a pause before the crowd erupted into applause. It wasn't just a polite clap, it was genuine. People were moved by her story, and Amara felt a sense of pride that she hadn't expected. She had. As the weeks passed after the successful community event, the store continued to grow and evolve. Amara's involvement had become a symbol of change, and the store was quickly becoming a central point of pride for the local community. The atmosphere was lighter than it had ever been, with people of all backgrounds walking through the doors without fear of judgment. Amara had noticed that, slowly but surely, the store was changing not just in appearance, but in the heart of the people who worked there. She could see the difference every time she stepped inside. Staff members greeted customers with genuine warmth, and there was a sense of camaraderie among the employees. Mr. Thompson, who had once seemed so distant, was now much more approachable. He made an effort to engage with customers and even seemed to smile more. Amara couldn't help but feel a sense of relief, knowing that he was trying to make up for his previous behavior. Though the past couldn't be erased, the future could be shaped by their actions today. One afternoon, Amara was helping her mom with some shopping when she saw Mrs. Caldwell chatting with a few of the regular customers near the entrance. Mrs. Caldwell's face was bright, and she was laughing, making the people around her feel at ease. Amara could see that her presence alone made the store feel even more inviting. As Amara approached, Mrs. Caldwell waved her over. "Amara, come here. I've been meaning to tell you something." Amara walked over, feeling a sense of curiosity about what was going on. Mrs. Caldwell looked excited, her eyes sparkling. "I have a big surprise for you." Amara raised an eyebrow. "A surprise? What is it?" "I'm planning to expand the community outreach program," Mrs. Caldwell explained. "We've had so many customers and community members ask about doing more events like the one we had. People really want a space where they can connect with one another and feel safe. So I've decided to start a regular community gathering." Amara's eyes widened in surprise. "Really? That sounds amazing. But what do you need me to do?" "I want you to help me lead the first one," Mrs. Caldwell said, her voice filled with confidence. "You have such a strong voice, Amara, and people listen to you. I think this is something you could really help with. We'll have a discussion panel, some activities for kids, and everyone will get a chance to share what they've been experiencing. It's going to be a space for learning, connecting, and supporting each other." Amara felt a flutter of nervousness in her chest, but also excitement. It had been a while since the event, and though she still felt some anxiety when it came to public speaking, she had gained a new confidence. She had seen firsthand how powerful a conversation could be, how one story shared could create understanding and change. This new opportunity was just another chance to contribute to the community that had supported her. "Okay," Amara said after a moment's pause. "I'd love to help. When do we start planning?" "Right now." Mrs. Caldwell grinned. "I want to get the word out soon, and we'll start planning everything for the next event. It's going to be big, bigger than the last one." As the days went on, Amara worked closely with Mrs. Caldwell to plan the event. They coordinated with the staff, local groups, and even some guest speakers who could offer valuable insight into inclusivity and community building. They wanted to make sure everyone, regardless of background, could come together and share their stories in a safe, welcoming space. The day of the event came quickly, and Amara felt a mix of excitement and nervous energy. She stood at the front of the store, a large banner now hanging above the entrance that read "Unity in our community." It was a small, simple message, but to her, it felt like a declaration of everything they had worked for: respect, understanding, and connection. As people started to trickle in, Amara noticed how diverse the crowd was. There were families with young children, elderly couples, teenagers, and even people who had been strangers to her only a few weeks ago. The energy was buzzing with anticipation, and the conversations that filled the room were all about building relationships and strengthening their community. It was everything she had hoped for and more. When it was time for the discussion panel to begin, Amara took her place beside Mrs. Caldwell and a few other speakers. The crowd settled in, ready to listen and engage. Amara started the conversation by sharing her own story again, this time with a bit more confidence. She spoke about how the store had once made her feel excluded, but now it was a place where everyone had a voice. The audience listened closely, and when she finished, there was a wave of applause. Amara felt a warm sense of pride. She had never imagined she could make such an impact, but here she was, speaking to. As time went on, the store continued to flourish, and Amara couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed. The transformation wasn't just in the store itself, but in her own heart. What had started as a painful experience had turned into an opportunity for growth, both for her and for the community. She had learned the power of standing up for what was right and how one voice, even hers, could spark change. She had also realized how much the support of others mattered. None of this would have been possible without the collective effort of the community, Mrs. Caldwell, and everyone who had rallied behind her. The regular community events became a staple in the store, and each one seemed to bring more people together. Amara continued to help organize them, and with each new gathering, she felt more comfortable and more confident in her ability to make a difference. Her story, once something she had kept to herself, had become a source of inspiration for others. People came up to her at every event, thanking her for sharing her experience and expressing how much it had meant to them. They had felt isolated too, but now they felt like they were part of something bigger. One afternoon, as Amara was helping Mrs. Caldwell organize some materials for the next event, she paused for a moment and looked around the store. It was a simple space, nothing extravagant, but it felt special. People weren't just coming in to shop. They were coming to connect, to learn, and to share their stories. Amara realized that the store had become a place of healing, a place where people felt safe enough to be themselves without fear of judgment. She also saw the difference in the staff. Mr. Thompson, once distant and stern, was now one of the most engaged and friendly employees. He worked alongside the rest of the team with a sense of pride, eager to help customers and ensure that everyone felt respected. The training and efforts had made a real difference, and Amara couldn't help but feel proud of how far they had come. She had witnessed firsthand how people could change when given the opportunity to learn, grow, and be held accountable for their actions. Amara and Tina often talked about how much the store had impacted their lives. Tina, who had been hesitant at first to get involved, had become just as passionate about the cause as her daughter. They had both found a sense of purpose in helping the store create a better environment for everyone. It wasn't just about the clothes anymore. It was about creating a space where people could feel valued, respected, and heard. One evening, as Amara was leaving the store after a long day of helping with preparations for the next event, she bumped into Mrs. Caldwell outside. The store was quiet, the evening sky darkening above them. Mrs. Caldwell turned to Amara with a thoughtful smile. "You know, Amara," she said softly. "I don't think any of us could have imagined what this store would become when I first took over. But I want to thank you for being a part of it. Your courage has changed everything." Amara smiled, feeling a sense of warmth fill her chest. "I didn't do it alone, Mrs. Caldwell. It was all of us. Everyone who believed in making this place better." Mrs. Caldwell nodded. "True, but you started it. You stood up when it was hard, and you helped people realize that small changes can make a big difference. You've helped shape this store into something more than just a business. It's become a community. That's something you can be really proud of." Amara stood there for a moment, taking it all in. She had been through a lot, but in the end, she had found something far more important than clothes. She had found a sense of belonging. She had found her voice, and through it, she had helped create a space where others could find theirs too. As Amara looked back at the store, she realized that the journey she had started, one filled with confusion and hurt, had turned into something much greater. It had become a story of healing, growth, and unity. The community had come together, not just to shop, but to create something that would last. A place where everyone felt respected, where differences were celebrated, and where people could truly be themselves. For Amara, the store wasn't just a building. It was a reminder of how far they had come, how much had changed, and how much more could be accomplished when people worked together. She couldn't wait to see where the journey would take them next, knowing that with every small step, they were making a big impact.